Good morning, my beautiful people. I have returned from Scotland and it was amazing. So I'm going to do a few videos about Scotland, but this one is about the spiritual connections that were made. So if you've been following along, you might want to pack a snack for this video. I don't know how long it's going to be. But if you followed along, I was going to Scotland to celebrate my birthday, which actually happened back in October. I turned 50, and my bucket list item is to go to Scotland and play my bagpipes on this very tiny Hebridean island called Iona. And Iona is, a few places I think in Scotland claim to be like the spiritual birthplace of Scotland or the spiritual birthplace of Celtic Christianity. But Iona definitely has probably the number one claim to it, although I think there's one other place that might be close. But I wanted to go to Iona because near me where I live now, there is a place called Columba. And some people say Columcille, some people say Columcille. I'm going to go with the spelling of the words that it comes from, so I'm going to call it Columcille, but you can call it whatever you want. And it's a standing stone structure, and I'll put a link below to it so you can learn more about it. But it was created by this man who went to Iona and was so inspired that he literally came back. He was from the Midwest, came back, found property, and built this place with all these standing stones, which, I mean, he had to raise the money to move the big stones. He had to literally move the earth to make this place. And I thought, wow, this must be some tremendous place for this guy to do all this work. Like, why would he do this? He must have been truly inspired. So I want to go there. Now, unfortunately, this man died the year before I moved back to Pennsylvania and learned about it. And his husband had died prior to that. So neither of these two guys were, were alive when I first went to Columcille. So I was like, wow, I really want to go there. Like this, it's got to be some tremendous place. And I always feel when I'm at Columcille very connected to this man. I don't know him. I never met him. I hear stories about him. He smoked a pipe. He challenged you to think about things. He was a minister, and I think he stayed a minister, but he wasn't a minister at a church anymore once he started work at Columcille. But he was definitely Christian. But I think had, like me, I don't want to say given up on the church, because I really don't think that that's what I've done, and I don't know what he did, but I've moved away from sort of that. I don't know how to exactly say it. I'm not angry at the church. I'm not a church meaning universal, not particularly a denomination. I've moved away from it. I'm not angry with it. I don't have anything against it. I don't judge people who go to church. It's not like that. Just for me, in my spirituality, I think the best place for me is in nature, doing my own thing. And then having spiritual advisors who I think, understand scripture and understand, what Jesus's work was and the mission of the, I don't want to say the philosophical church, but the church inside, not the physical building, but the church inside. So I feel like connected because I feel like maybe this person also felt that way. And so, I go to Iona and, and I had saved up for this trip for a long time, and it really does take a long time to get there, right? You have to take a train, then you take a ferry, then you take a bus, then another ferry, and then you get to this 3-mile by 1-mile island in the middle of nowhere. So we get there. It's beautiful. I'm like crying on the ferry. I mean, I'm emotional. So, but I'm like captured by this place. We get there and we go to our bed and breakfast. So the caretaker at the bed and breakfast is an English fella. And he says, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Oh, we're from Pennsylvania." And he says, "Huh, I lived there for a year. Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, we're originally from Bethlehem, but now we live in Palmerton." And he goes, "Really? I lived in Bethlehem for a year." And he says, "And I worked on a place called column seal, building a bell tower with this guy, this pastor named Fred and Bill. These guys named Fred and Bill. I mean, you could have picked me up off the floor with a scraper. That is column keel. So here I am in the middle of like the remotest part of the world, and the guy that takes care of the bed and breakfast not only knew Fred and Bill, but helped build the bell tower that's there. It's a bell tower chapel, and he knew Fred and Bill, and he lived in Bethlehem. And I'm like, all right, Spirit, all right, I hear you. This is not an accident. And I never met Bill or Fred, but okay, I hear you too. Like, I hear you too. So, I'm like, wow, what? I mean, there are no accidents, there are no coincidences. Like, this was designed. So, the interesting thing about Iona is that the Abbey part, like the inner workings of the Abbey, are run by the Iona community. And it is an ecumenical, interfaith, social justice community that work for peace. And the people are tremendous. They had service in the morning and at night. I could not get up for the morning service because I love breakfast, so I went to breakfast, but I did go to the evening services, and I'm not much of a churchgoer anymore. So I found them to be tremendous. They were short, 40 minutes, and they used prayers and hymns from all around the world, and they have a different theme each day. Social justice issues related, peace, things related to peace. And I thought that was tremendous. And then you're in this beautiful abbey, and it's just, like you feel very connected to these strangers that are from all over the world. During the day, the National Historic Trust runs the abbey. So you have to pay a fee to get onto the grounds, to go through the tour, and it can feel very touristy, I will say, during the day, because you can't access the Abbey unless you pay the £16 to go through. And the people aren't super friendly. Like, their mission is not to spread light, love, and, the love of Jesus. It's to make, to get the money to upkeep the property. So, so some of the reviews that you hear from people are about the touristy thing, and that if they've come over on the ferry for the day and have just come to do like the Abbey and then leave, it is very touristy. Like, sort of the magic of Iona happens before they open and after they close, because then you can walk freely around the Abbey and go to the services. There's a graveyard there where reportedly, King Macbeth, with which Shakespeare's Macbeth is based on, he was buried there along with 11 other Scottish kings, and then some other kings and famous rich people and chieftains and stuff like that. But they've all been removed now from that graveyard. And, it's just a tremendous, so there's a nunnery, there's the ruins of a nunnery. I played my pipes there. That was awesome. Like, you really do feel very connected to the space. So I go on the official tour, and because it gave me access to the grounds, I wanted to climb up this little hill thing where St. Columba reportedly had his study room. And I had to do that during the day because I didn't want to be climbing up there at night. So with my pipes, so I wanted to go up there. So during the day, I went to the bookstore, the gift store, right? And I wanted to buy gifts for like my nieces that came right from Iona, things for my mother-in-law, stuff like that. And I wanted to support the work of the community. So I was real careful in the gift shop, actually in all the gift shops in Scotland. I really wanted gifts made in Scotland to support the Scottish economy. So I go in the gift store, and there are probably 300 books, right? It's like a bookstore, gift store, pins, Highland Coos, like the whole 9 yards. But there's like 300 books, and I'm looking at them, and one like really stands out to me. It's this pretty, it was a pretty book and card set, with very like beautiful pictures of Iona and then simple words. And, I like the sort of reflection of different cards. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'll get for myself. So I get it, and I buy it, and I take it back, and I pack it in my bag, and I didn't have a chance to open it because we had other things to do, and we were going to get ready to leave the next day. So, I don't think about it. But then the next day, we're in a different town, in Inverary, which was my favorite town. And a very different experience, right? Like, so Iona is its own thing, and I would definitely go back to Iona on its own, even with maybe a service group, and then the rest of Scotland is its own awesome thing. So I'm like, well, we had a little downtime, so I'm gonna check out these cards. I open the book, and I kid you not, the person who wrote it was inspired to write it because she went to a place called Columba in Bangor, Pennsylvania. The coincidence is just, there are no coincidences, right? There were 300 books, pretty books, in that bookshop, and I picked the one that was written because the woman was inspired to go to Iona because of Columba in Bangor, which is exactly the same reason I went. And she no longer lives in Pennsylvania. She has been doing tours, bringing groups of people to Iona to do the spiritual community stuff, and she actually met her husband, so now she lives in Scotland. But how, like, crazy is that? So I find her email in the book, and I write this up to her. Like, I write the little story to her, and I figure, like, she's not going to write back. Nobody ever, when you have a web form like that, nobody ever responds. She writes back right away. And she was with a group of tourists that she was taking to Iona at that very moment from Columba in Bangor, Pennsylvania. I can't even make this stuff up. I can't even make this stuff up. So it was like, I was totally meant to be on Iona, but I think for my own self, like I struggled a little bit because I'm like, why? Like, I don't know if I expected, like, fireworks to shoot out of the ocean or what. I was expecting some, like, kind of thing, but I think it's in reflection that I really realized how magical the experience was. I think it was hard because we wanted to see so much in Scotland, and we really did. We went to Glencoe, we went to the Borders, we stayed in Inverary, like, we did all these things. And it was really hard to wrap my spiritual brain around my trip to Iona because it was part of, like, all these other things that I was doing. So, kind of like when you make a soup and you have, like, a spice that you really want to showcase in the soup, but then all the other ingredients sort of, like, mix in with it, and the soup is good, but, like, you didn't get the flavor that you wanted out of that spice. So I figured that's probably more what happened, because we were just in love with everything that we saw, and it was hard to sort it out. So I'll definitely go to Iona again, probably on a service trip with the Iona community, doing that sort of work on its own, and then visit Scotland, the rest of Scotland, on other trips, or at the end of that trip to make it a separate experience. But the connections didn't stop there. So when we first arrived, and we were in Helensburgh. Was it Helensburgh? I'm trying to think of where it was. There's this other time that was really like, wow, I'm really supposed to be here. But now I can't remember what it is. So I'll do a different video about it. I was thinking about it before I went to bed last night, and I was like, I have to absolutely mention this because it was such a weird thing. But I can't remember what it is now. So I'm going to get a drink, and then I come back, and maybe then I'll remember what it was. All right, I will look through my pictures because I knew that would jog my memory. So, on our way to Oban, which is where you pick up the ferry to go to Iona, there was a rainbow out the window, and it was a perfect rainbow. I could see the ends of it, like on both ends. Like, I've never, usually you see like half a rainbow, or you'll see a full rainbow, but you can't physically see the ends of the rainbow, where the gold is supposed to be, right? Like, it was the perfect rainbow, like, on my way over, because, I'm always asking Spirit for signs, like, is this the right thing to be doing? Is this what I should be doing? So, like, that was, like, tremendous. And then when when we were in Glasgow, which is where we went to first, I went to the National Society for Piping. It's like the piping college in Scotland. And no Highland bagpipes were played there. There was this amazing guy, though. I was in the bathroom, and I thought, wow, this is really great music they had playing. He was playing the Olean pipes, the Irish pipes. And it was so beautiful. Like, it was perfect. It was like, recording quality. Well, I come out of the bathroom and it's this guy in the library playing. So we had this great chat. I'm super friendly, so I've met lots and lots of people there, and just great people. So we had gone for tea in the Tryst, which is the restaurant there, and there was a woman there who was traveling, and she had all this information and shared with me all this information about St. Bridget. Now, I don't know if you can see behind me, but that is St. Bridget's cross there. And on Iona, there's St. Bridget's well. I didn't get to it. I didn't get up to it because it was super windy, and like the weather was okay, but I just didn't feel called to go to it while I was there. It was on my list of things to do, but I was called to do other things. But I mean, like, you can't make this stuff up, all these connections. Like, what are the odds that in this restaurant, this tiny little cafe attached to the piping school, there is a woman who knows everything about St. Bridget, had all kinds of pictures on her phone from different renditions of Bridget. And I'm going to Iona where there's a St. Bridget's well, and Iona celebrates 3 saints: St. Columba, St. Patrick, and Bridget. You can't make this stuff up. You can't, like, it's so, like, the connections were so tremendous. And then when we were in Inverary, which is a great town, like, it's such a great town, and we stayed at the George Hotel, which is like my favorite hotel in the world. And it was like, it has a bunch of little different pubs in it, and music, and it's just like you feel like you're in Scotland, because it's like that old kind of tavern that like existed in the 1800s. But we met these 2 women, Claire and Joy, and they're into Reiki and crystals and spiritual energy. And the Claire reminded me so much of my friend Betty. Funny, the 2 of them are funny, just hysterical, totally no BS, like, like Betty, but also a little bit like me. It's like I found my tribe all the way across the pond in this random, they were there for a lecture. We were, they're traveling, and we meet these people who, like, we are on the same page about things like politics and the world and the media. And it's like, again, like, spirit, like, I was distracted by being a tourist, but spirit kept knocking on my door and saying, like, here are these connections for you. And it, like, there were so many of those instances. Like, I was definitely meant to go to Scotland. I was definitely the Borders tours. Like, we went to Hermitage Castle, which was held at one time by the Douglas clan, which is where some of my DNA sits. And when I was there, I didn't, like, it just felt like I was home. Like, not, like, not that it was my castle or anything, but it just felt like, wow, like, this is, like, when you're looking at something that maybe your great grandmother had. It was just, I felt very much at home in that space, in these ruins of a castle. And the Borders were very comfortable for me, and a lot of my DNA comes from the Borders, Clan Armstrong, being my predominant clan, and Clan Dunakai. So it was just tremendous. And then on the way home, we stayed one night in Glasgow, and it was the night of the coronation. And the Scottish people, by and large, either they don't care about the coronation, or they don't agree with it and think it's a waste of money when there are poor people starving. But there are a few loyalists, I guess, or nationalists, or whatever they're called, who do celebrate the coronation and the king and everything. So we had stayed above a tavern, and they were having this big coronation party. And then there was almost a fight outside for this other guy who didn't agree with it, and started, saying words to people who were there. And it was just interesting to me, because I thought, when I was there, I thought my mother would have loved this. She would have loved this little party. She would have wanted to go downstairs, because my mother was, English, and very proud of her English heritage, and loved the king and loved the queen, and or would love the king and did love the queen, and she would have loved all this, so I felt my mom's presence there, like, and everybody in this place, in this tavern, looked like my mother. So, all the older women looked like my mom. So I was thinking, like, even my mom, it was there in spirit. I felt it wise to just not participate in their cultural or political discussions, because I don't, A, know enough about it, and B, like, I don't think that much about our politics. I'm certainly not going to think about theirs. So it was just overall a tremendous experience, and definitely a spiritual experience. And I got runes when I was there. When I was in Inverary, there was a crystal shop. There were two, actually, sister shops. And I asked if they had runes, and they had 2 different sets. So I got a set. And I pulled stones twice from here, and both times, I was asking, like, what should I focus on? And both times I got the Gibo stone, which is gift. So I'm going to end this with a pull and see what Spirit has to say about the work I do next. What is it that I do next? So let's pick a rune. And they're not raised. I'm always very careful when I get runes that the letters aren't raised, so I can't like use it like Braille. And this time we have Tyr, which is direction. And, like the little arrow is telling you to, like, direct your motions. So let me just get my book so that we can be sure to read all of the things that go with Tyr. So hold on one second. So Tiwaz is masculinity, justice, and logic. Leadership, battle, justice, sacrifice. Justice is a balance and requires wisdom. Sacrifice or selflessness. There are things more important than ourselves. Sacrifice ourselves for others. Honor, righteous fairness. Loyalty, faith. Higher rationality, providing deeper wisdom. No fairness without empathy, rationality. Spiritual warrior, so it's just the spiritual stone. Having come from Iona, I get the spiritual warrior stone. Some opposition may be coming. Honor, bravery, courage, self-discipline, stand up for the weak, success in business, or success in a legal threat. So, Spirit was very clear. I was distracted a lot by traveling, because everything was new and shiny and awesome, and I loved it and everything. But now, as I reflect back, it's no accident that all of these signs of Bill and Fred were everywhere. I didn't know the guys. I didn't know them. And I came to Columba after it was already built. So I wasn't part of the process in building it. But I do always feel when I'm there that there's something spoken to me about, like, one thing I'll say about Columba now is that it is kind of losing, I think, what the intention of Bill and Fred was, which is it's a spiritual center for Christians who want to celebrate peace without the constrictions of the church, right? And when I've been at Columba, they've sort of moved away from the Christianity thing and made it more, I don't want to say witchcraftian, because I don't think that's necessarily true, although it may be in part, but they're neglecting the Christian part of it. Like, they're not at all focusing on it. So maybe it's a message from Fred and Bill to go and make sure that doesn't get lost. I'm already listed on the volunteer list for Columba. They had a big volunteer trip this week while I was in Scotland. Maybe that's the role that I'll go play, just to make sure that doesn't get lost. They, for example, celebrate the Eightfold Wheel, and I've gone to a few of their celebrations, and they are definitely pagan, which is, not a problem, except that I think that Fred and Bill were Christian, and they don't want that lost. And maybe that's the role that I'm being asked to play, is just to make sure that there's a balance in sort of the presentations of the things that happen. I don't know anybody at Columba. I don't actually know anybody who volunteers there. I've been there a few times, but I don't know anybody. So it's like starting from ground zero. I'm going to, like, walk in and say, oh, by the way, I feel very connected to the guys that started this, and they want you to stop neglecting Jesus. I mean, they're going to think I'm crazy. So that's the opposition that's coming, I think, about it. But I'm brave and I'm strong, and I'm diplomatic. So, maybe there are good ways to infuse Christianity, Celtic Christianity, back into what they're doing there. So it was a tremendous trip, and I'm going to do a top 10 tips for Scotland video next, for those of you getting ready to travel to Scotland. Lots of things that I learned, and things aren't always what they seem. Like, they don't have washcloths there. I'm like, do they? Like, wow, they don't use washcloths. And then I wrote my tips up and I posted them in the Scotland site. And the one woman wrote, well, of course we don't have washcloths. Like, we don't provide toothbrushes either. Like, that's a personal item. Why would you wash your face with a cloth that somebody washed their privates with? I had never thought of that. I had never in a million years, having traveled extensively my whole life, I have never thought of that. And I was schooled, because that is a very good perspective, and now I'm going to carry a washcloth with me everywhere. So a washcloth is considered something very personal, like a toothbrush or dental floss, and they don't provide them because you should provide your own so that it's only touched to your body. Fascinating. So we can always learn a new perspective. I am wishing you all the very best in light and love. If you stuck around this long, thank you, and I will catch you later for room pool with my new runes. Bye-bye.